Hi you guys, it's me, Arden Lee. I am back today with another video, and in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics behind why it is so damaging for ourselves when we keep amplifying the when we keep amplifying evidence of the very things that we don't want to see more of in the world. When we keep amplifying things that are not the thing that we want. When we keep through the energy of complaining, of venting, of if we get so caught up in that energy where we continue to speak about or to post or any way in any other way amplify the things that we don't want. I want to talk about why that is so toxic. So I'll explain a little bit more about the mechanics of that when I get into this video. Naturally, as always, if you've not yet subscribed to my channel and or liked my page, I would love to invite you to do that now. And if you're not yet familiar with me and my work, my name is Arden Lee. I am the creator of an 8-week online course called The Repatterning Project. And in the Repatterning Project, we take our attendees, our participants, through this 8-week container where we examine all of our patterns. We learn all the ways that our beliefs are formed. We learn all of the unconscious ways in which we've been operating so we can shed those, so we can start to choose paths that are serving us, so we can step into our soul purpose, so that we can start creating lives that we want deliberately with our creative freedom and our creative power, right? We free ourselves from all the things that we think are true, that we've taken on throughout all of our lives, the ways that these beliefs form, and we start to actually create what we want to see, right? This is very possible, and I'm going to explain a lot about how this works in this upcoming video. So anyway, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, go ahead and check out the description box. I have a link to a free PDF guide about the Repatterning Project if you want more information about the course. I also have a link to the Repatterning Parlor, which is the free group that I moderate on Facebook, full of like-minded individuals to come together and support each other on their paths forward. So come join us. We would love to welcome you. It's a great community if you're looking to learn more about the subject material or just looking for some spaces to talk about the changes that you want to make in your life and to get support from people who are also looking to do the same thing. Right? How many times do we say things like to our friends and family, and even if they're concerned for us, even if they're well-intentioned, they end up putting us down, like, well, don't do that. That's too risky. Don't commit to this big thing. Don't, they don't think it's possible, so they don't want you to fail. So they try and convince you that it's not possible either. But without realizing how detrimental their concern trolling is to you. So it's great to have that social support network of people who are looking to make the same kind of changes that you're making, right? We become the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So come over and hang out with us in the parlor. We would love to see you there. Alrighty, so earlier today, I made a post in a group because there was sort of a trend happening in the group. The group's rules are don't share what happens, and so I'm not going to speak of any, I'm going to try my best to honor and respect that rule. So I'm not going to, speak of any specifics. I'm not going to name anybody. But there was a trend of posting a lot of screenshots of really bad behavior from men on dating apps. And we've been, as a collective, women have been doing this for the last several years. I want to say like around the time of Yes All Women in 2014. You guys remember the hashtag Yes All Women? This started happening because we've been taking this shit for too long, and we've been silent about it the whole time. So we started putting it out there, like, look at the ways that men are behaving when no one else is looking. We had people start, starting the trend of contacting these men's girlfriends or wives or mothers when they're going on and they're harassing, women on Instagram or whatever. And I believe that was incredibly important to enlightening the collective to the reality that was collecting under the rug, that was just being swept under there and ignored, right? Absolutely. Voicing those things was super, super important. However, anytime we have an emergent phenomenon, it can often keep going past not only past its expiration date, but past its original purpose, right? Anytime we have something that is growing at that rapid rate, it's going to potentially, it's like playing Whisper Down the Lane. The original intention gets distorted, and people start joining in just because it's a trend, and it ends up accumulating and conglomerating, and sometimes existing in ways that are actually unhelpful, even though the original intention was supposed to be helpful. So the original intention was supposed to illuminate people and say, look at what men are doing when they think nobody is looking. They're harassing Instagram models, and they're behaving really, really poorly on dating websites. Just absolute verbal abuse. Reactions when they're perceiving being rejected, or just really. But like, it's 2019, you guys, and I think we all know that now. Like, I don't think there's anybody who's surprised that men are behaving badly on the internet. We got that. We got it out there. And what's happening now is that people are posting more and more and more of this kind of material. And what's happening is that they're amplifying this bad behavior. And then more people come on, and they will post things that are, maybe not as severe as some of the original ones. Maybe they're just annoyed. Maybe some guy is just not acting the way that they want. But they've seen all these posts and these screenshots, and they've seen everyone getting, likes and sympathy and validation for them. And they're like, this guy didn't even write me back after I wrote him on a dating app. What an asshole. It's like, no, that's not that thing that you think it is. That is you seeing that thing, because you are seeing that thing everywhere. And when what you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So I'm going to talk a little bit. This is going to be so short, you guys, because this is so much I'm going to try and keep this short, but I'm going to unpack a lot of complicated mechanics, okay? Of the way that our brains work, and the way that we start to see things in the world, and we start to attract more of those experiences. It's law of attraction stuff, but I'm not going to throw this at you like, woo, law of attraction, and expect you to believe me. I'm going to unpack it for you. So this is what happens. What happens is our brains take in information through our 5 senses at a rate of 8 billion bits per second. And because our brains can't possibly store all of that information that it's taking in the present moment, then what they start to do is they delete, they distort, they generalize. And they find a relatively good picture that's a summary that they then compress into memory, okay? So for example, I can look over at my bookshelf over there, and I can tell you, I have The Art of War, I have the 2 Arabian Nights volumes, I have Mastery by Robert Greene, 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. I'm a big Robert Greene fan, so I'm like looking. But the point is, I can tell you all that because I'm looking at it, right? But if I look away, now I close my eyes, I can picture my bookshelf. I know what my bookshelf looks like. I see it literally every day. I live in the same apartment with it. But I couldn't tell you the order of all the books or what titles and authors were on all of them, right? Because my brain can't possibly remember that unless I'm like that man who's like a genius, has a very divergent brain, who takes airplane rides and memorizes every detail of a city, and then pencil sketches these incredibly realistic drawings of the city that he saw from the helicopter ride that he took over the city. Helicopter, not airplane. That would be harder to see. So unless you have a brain like that, you're just going to remember what is familiar to you. So what do I remember about my bookshelf right now? Well, I definitely remember I have a lot of Robert Greene there. I definitely have the complete works of William Shakespeare. That's an important book. I've got my bookshelf with books on love and relationships. That of course includes my book, The New Rules of Attraction. I've got another section where it's like my Neil Strauss section. I've got a poetry section. But that's how much I remember without actually looking at it, right? I remember the things that are familiar. I remember probably my favorite books, my favorite authors. I can pick them off the top of my head because I'm like, oh, I've read that. They're my favorite. I'm thinking of that, right? I think of Neil Strauss because I probably looked at his Facebook profile like 30 seconds before making this video, because his Facebook stories come up on when I check my Facebook, because we're friends. So that's probably why I thought of that, right? Because it's familiar. It's in my brain already. So that's how our memories work. And we pick out the information that we choose to store is what is most familiar to us, because that's how we make sense of our worldview, okay? So that's why if I think about what is already familiar to me, the Arabian Nights books are like they're some of my favorite stories. I have a whole section on witchcraft. I have there's a book called Only Ever Yours, and I think of that because it's actually sticking out, and I keep meaning to like put it back in its place, but because of that, I notice it more often because it's sticking out. I have a whole bunch of like some of my other favorite ones. I have like favorite erotica, 100 Strokes of the Brush Before Bedtime. I have like my favorite relationship books are by Stan Tatkin. I have Wired for Love and Wired for Dating. Why am I remembering all this? Because it's what's familiar to me. I don't remember the names of the books that I haven't read yet because I haven't exposed myself to them as much, right? I remember the books that I've read over and over again. So my point is, your brain remembers the information that you show it over and over again. It remembers the things that are most familiar to it. Even when there was a study conducted where a bunch of researchers went and showed a clip from a spaghetti western film to a bunch of indigenous people. And they were like, hey, look at this film. Now give us your responses to it. We want to know what you thought. And every indigenous person who sat down with the researchers said, oh yeah, I noticed the chickens. And the researchers are thinking, what chickens? What's going on? And sure enough, next guy sits down, yeah, I noticed the chickens. Yeah, the chickens, man. So finally the researchers rewatched the clip and they noticed that in the background of the spaghetti western, there's some chickens walking by that they hadn't even thought of before. Because to the researchers, it's the actors that are the most important thing because they're talking about film. But to the indigenous people, they were like, we don't understand this film thing. We don't know who those actors are. But what we do, we know chickens. We definitely know chickens. Like, we're like so stoked about seeing the chickens in this film. That's super cool. Because that's what's familiar to them, because they were people who were raising chickens, you know? They dealt with chickens every day. So that was what was familiar with them. That was what was familiar to them, and that is what stood out to them when they saw that clip. So what happens when we continually post things, examples of things that we don't want to see? When we continually post screenshots of men behaving terribly, we keep amplifying that, and we keep believing that that's what to expect, and we end up selecting for that out of the 8 billion bits of information that our brains are taking in through our 5 senses throughout our everyday experience. We see more and more men being terrible, or whatever it is, whatever that thing is that you are amplifying, that you are complaining about, that you are venting about, that you are posting and continuing to expose yourself to over and over again with no solution seeking, no catharsis. You're just programming your brain to see more of what you don't want. So please don't do this. Please, for the love of all that is holy. I rewired my own relationship to the masculine, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I've told this story once or twice before. There's a video on this channel. If you want to know more about that process, look up on my channel a video called How to Have Healthy Relationships with Men When We Live in a Trigger-Laden Patriarchal Dumpster Fire. That is actually the name of the video. You can get more information on how I did that process there, but the short version was, it was 2 weeks before the 2016 election. There was sexual assault all over the media. I have a ton of sexual assault trauma in my own past myself. I didn't feel like there were any men who were showing up for me, and I finally found one little seed, one little sprout. I was like, oh, there's one man I can think of who's being really decent to me right now. It was just over email. He wasn't even in the same country as me. I started out with a single supportive email. An email a man had sent to me giving me emotional support without expecting anything in return. And I was like, okay, I got that. It's tiny, but I got it, and I'm going to start from there. And now, you guys, I'm at a place in my life. It's been 2.5 years, almost 2.25, maybe 2.33. But wow, I can barely swing a cat in this town without hitting an awesome conscious man, you know, who is really looking to show up and treat women well, who understands, kind of like the Gillette ad, who knows enough to read the room and knows that there are problems with toxic masculinity and just doesn't want to be that dude, who is not doing it for immediate cookies, who is not doing it for, oh, if I'm nice to this woman, then maybe she'll have sex with me, but just rather that, like, if I'm a good person, I will also attract more good people. If I treat women well, then I will attract women who reasonably expect to be treated well. I will have healthier relationships in my life. if I follow this path of evolution, right? It's partly altruistic, but it's also partly self-serving because those men also want to be healthy, right? So I'm sure like there's people who are like, oh, they're just doing it to get laid. Stop it. Now that might be true of some guys, sure. But please allow yourself the possibility. I have a ton of guys in my life who I don't have sex with. Those most of you have known that who've followed my work have heard me mention before that for these past, 2.5 years or so that I've been doing this healing, I've been mostly celibate. There have been like a couple of exceptions, but they've been really rare. So when I say I have a ton of men showing up in my life for me, it's not because I'm blowing them all. It's because they know what being a good man in 2019 is going to entail, and they are facing those challenges head on. And they're not perfect, but they're trying and they're listening. And I've gone off the handle at them many times, and they've held space for me around that and said, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. Here's my response to that, and here's how I'm going to handle this or whatever, It's been wild. My whole expectations about what was possible for men have been totally blown wide open, and it's been great. So, but in order to do that, I had to stop focusing on all the ways that men were terrible. Because when I was focusing on all the ways that men were terrible, I wasn't leaving any space for men who were not terrible to show up for me. And if you're in that energy, you guys, if you're in that vibration, and someone posted in a different group the other day, someone posted a meme about all the kinds of terrible men there are and how there are only these kinds of men in the world to date right now, that there are no good men to date. And there was a man who came onto that post and said, yeah, if I saw a woman post this, I probably wouldn't ask her out. You're not going to attract a healthy, conscious man by immersing yourself in all kinds of beliefs about why men are terrible. And this is just an example of one thing. You could be a dude and have have these beliefs about women as well. I'm just sharing this example because it's quite prevalent in a way that phenomenon is emergent from a movement that was important to the collective at the time. So this applies to anything. This could apply to your beliefs about money. This could apply to your beliefs about your job. All I'm saying is that what you focus on increases. And those are the mechanics behind why. Our beliefs are formed through, there are 4 ways, okay? Trauma happens, forms a belief. Repetition, mantras, affirmations, joining a new social circle. This is how cults get people, right? We join a new peer group. We are biologically programmed to avoid ostracism, so we want to fit in. So we start believing the things that they believe. And finally, hypnosis, right? That's how I do timeline therapy with a lot of my clients in order to rework those beliefs themselves. So there we go. That's that last one. We can take it back. It's not like full, super deep hypnosis. It's more of a light trance visualization, but it works super well. I love working with that modality. It's really fun. So if you are immersing yourself in a social group and everyone in it is repeating things about the beliefs that you don't want to have, if you're joining a peer group where people are talking for all the time about how terrible men are, don't be surprised if it takes a toll on your relationships with men. This is how we are biologically wired. This is how our human systems operate. So whatever you're doing, whoever you are, whichever ways this manifests for you, just please, I beg you to reconsider your tactics. And it is absolutely possible to make great big changes in your life just by changing your intentions around your thoughts, your beliefs, what you focus on, what you share, and what you amplify. Favorite word lately is amplify. What are we amplifying in our lives, right? Because sometimes choosing is like, people are like, oh, what are you choosing? And it's like, that's a great word too, but sometimes, shit just happens, right? And we don't want to fall into that language of like, oh, we attracted this bad situation, right? Even if sometimes there may be ways of bringing that more under our control that we can hack eventually, right? We don't want to use any language that sounds shaming. So I'm really lately into the word amplify. What are we amplifying? There's plenty of stuff that's there already, but what are we amplifying? So please be intentional about what you're sharing, what you're thinking, what you're choosing, what you're amplifying. what you are choosing to focus on in your life. And even if there's just that tiny seed, that tiny spark of hope, it doesn't have to be a lot. You just have to find something to start with and grow it out from there. I promise you it works. Thank you guys. Appreciate you listening. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next video.